Welcome back to a Stampede Blue Colts cast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Matt Danley. Thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight. Coming back and talking about a little bit of everything that's happened in the past few days, mainly Colts OTAs news. Not a whole lot going on there, but Frank Reich did speak there. There's some, the national anthem news. What about Andrew Luck? A couple other things going on with the Colts right now, but ultimately, let's just kind of jump right in to what's going on with the Colts. We saw a couple of interesting things the other day in OTAs. The beat writers were able to get some access finally. So one of the 3 days, we were able to actually get some news from everybody, and they had some interesting pairings throughout. Now, look, we've talked about this as far as not reading too much into what you see, who's on the field, what are the positional setups and such like that. But there was some interesting things. I mean, at will, they had Najee Good, not at Mike. Now, that was something that we had presumed, or at least I had presumed, was going to be the situation. Najee Good was going to probably be the Mike, but they ended up having him at the will position. Darius Leonard did not practice. My guess, just a total guess, and we haven't heard anything definitive either way, is that is due in part to him not being signed yet. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the case, but that was a guess. Also, Jack Mewhort did not practice, and they ended up having Slauson sitting in at right guard. So they also had the newest addition to the Colts offensive line, Austin Howard, at right tackle. I thought that was interesting that they didn't have Mewhort in practice. Now, I'm curious as to why that is. He's apparently completely healthy. There's no issues from what we understand with him. So why isn't he playing? But, Frank Reich kind of played it off such as that it was just, one of the situations that comes up occasionally, that this is what happens when you've got, your first day of OTAs. Some guys sit out, some guys practice, so on and so forth. But they did have the normal lineup there on the left side of the line, it appears, as well. So that's at least interesting to see what they had there. But also at linebacker, now kind of jumping around, just not a whole lot to talk about, but kind of, like I said, just jumping around just a little bit here. Anthony Walker was at the Mike, and Antonio Morrison was at the Sam. Strong side, that's going to be something that we have been at least told, that from that position, at least with Reich and Eberflus's system, that is expected not to get a whole lot of playing time. That is primarily the guy who comes out when the nickel package comes in. So Najee Good was there. Does that spell, that he's a backup throughout this behind Leonard? Does that spell that he's actually the starter instead of Leonard until Leonard earns it? I don't know. We don't know. It's kind of interesting to think about, though, just kind of the different pairings, because like I said, we've gone through this linebacking core several times, haven't we? Kind of trying to figure out who's where, who's best suited where. I definitely think that Morrison's last shot, and we've talked about this several times. I believe we've had an article or two up on Stampede Blue about it as well. But this has to be Morrison's last shot with the Colts, doesn't it? I mean, he has been undervalued, or underappreciated early in his career, and he didn't do much in the first year or so, and then he has just been completely off the reservation. He hasn't done much of anything. He hasn't deserved any credit, and he's a hard-nosed guy. He's a hard hitter, very aggressive, and I think that Sam position fits him theoretically, anyways. The problem is that he can't cover. It's not a high coverage position or anything like that, but it is interesting that he's going to be expected basically to be matching up against tight ends, and we're going to see all of this play out. I don't necessarily believe that he is the lock there by any means at the Sam, but I definitely think that if he doesn't get that role, he could be out the door. Najee Good, I'm a little interested to see why he isn't actually, at the mic. Why is Anthony Walker there? They said he slimmed down a little bit. They're going to want to get him into coverage. Another guy that we've talked about at the mic, there was Sky Moore. Sky wasn't practicing either, apparently, yesterday. So that's, something that we'll have to keep an eye on for the next set of OTAs, the next grouping of those. And those are next week, few days in a row there as well. So that'll be interesting to watch that. Is there going to be different guys out? Is there going to be more guys in? That's something that we're basically going to be getting on with. Like I said, with some of the guys sitting out, he basically, Reich, just kind of played it off as that's part of the process. It just happens. Guys sit, guys play, guys practice, whatever the case may be. So one of the other things that they talked about was the installation of the playbook. Now, he said that he had about 75% of the playbook in. This seems like it was just kind of common knowledge from Reich coming out of his mouth that they're going to have 75% of the playbook in already. I think that's impressive. I know that you give, rookies get their playbooks right away. New guys get it when they get there for the veteran, mini camp with a new coach and such. Having 75% of their playbook in, I think it's impressive. And we were talking to George Bremer the other night, and he, kind of alluded to that's, the way that these practices are a little bit different. That they, they're getting more done with the time that they've got in practice. Now, I can tell you from experience as well that last year in training camp, it was kind of a relaxed situation. And apparently from what we're hearing from George and some others, it doesn't really feel like that's, part of the process for Reich. He wants to get as much done as possible, which does keep these guys on their toes. It does keep these guys involved in the practices. It does keep them, making sure that they're in tune and focused on what's going on. They've got to know what's happening. And I kind of wonder if we're going to eventually start seeing some guys getting pulled from practice, or at least from the lineup the way it currently is, if they're not in tune. I wonder if we'll see something like that over the next couple OTA sessions. And there's only 3, and it's 10 days. So they're going to have another 3-day section, and then the next following week they're going to have a 4-day section, and that'll be it until minicamp. And that'll be another situation where we want to see what everybody's doing when they get into minicamp. Who is where everybody's at. Again, it's not training camp, but they will have guys there that they feel that's where they belong, with some specific guys sitting out in the first day of at least, something that was OTA practice that was actually being, looked at, and people were able to cover the team in practice. I thought it was a little interesting, but as far as guys moving around, but otherwise, we heard from Reich how impressed he is with this receiving core. We heard from Sirianni as well, the offensive coordinator. He really liked him. He said that they think they've got some playmakers. There's a lot of talk about Nyheim Hines. Of course, they like Fountain. They like Kane. They think that he's got something, but they mentioned KJ Brent, but Reich kind of stayed clear of that in his presser. He didn't really talk about any specific guys as far as in the wide receiver core. He just said, we've got some speed. We've got some big physical guys. We just saw on Instagram, in fact, Krishan Hogan. Now, I do talk about him, but I think he's a legitimate opportunist for the roster. I truly do. He's a big dude. He's fast. He's good. And I think that Ballard really likes him to begin with. So, but we saw him on Instagram, run a route, catching a ball behind him off of, maybe a trainer or just a random, ball boy or somebody throwing him a pass or whatever it was. But he looked fluid, looked good. It was a 3/4 speed route anyways, but you see him moving. He looks comfortable and smooth. And I think that that's kind of important when you consider that he had, the knee injury that he did last year. So I think all in all, they're really happy with this wide receiver core, even though there's really not much to speak of. Look, I kind of talked about these receivers today in a brief article about this on Stampede Blue, and I was kind of touching on who's where, what they've got as far as just guys with experience, and they just don't have it. And that isn't typically why, or obviously why now that nationally the Colts aren't really being taken seriously as far as their wide receiver core. I mean, if you look at T.Y. Hilton, T.Y. is far and away the guy on this roster. I don't need to tell anybody watching or listening that. That's obvious. But you've got Chester Rogers. A lot of people are high on Chester Rogers. Ryan Grant, we don't know a whole lot about him as far as what we're going to expect to see from him in the season. But those two guys after T.Y. are the only two with any experience. And those two together have a combined total of 126 catches in the league. They've got 7 touchdowns between the two of them. Hilton averages 70 catches and 5.5 touchdowns a year. So they're a little bit over a little less than 2 seasons worth of production combined for T.Y. Hilton, what he's done on his own. Everybody else on the roster combined, anybody with any experience whatsoever, has 28 total receptions in the league combined, the rest of the receiving core. So that is why nobody's giving them any pub. Nobody's giving them any love and feels like they just don't have anything to offer. But they do have that impressive group of rookies with Kane and Fountain, like Brent, like I said, and then another guy that's kind of, for a guy that Ballard's liked and wanted to bring in. Kaysen Williams was a guy who a lot of people, myself included, I know that Jake Arthur was high on him and wanted him to come in the last time that he was free, and the Colts didn't. He never got to the Colts, as far as I understand, as far as the waiver process at that time. But the Colts were able to snag him up this time. He's got some upside for sure. So there is some excitement, and I understand the excitement from the coaching staff. Of course, a lot of what people are saying is, what are they supposed to say? Of course, they're going to say that they're excited about the receiving core because those are their guys. But they do have some excitement. They are big. They are fast. They have some upside, some excitement that they could be bringing to the team. So, outside of that, there really wasn't a ton. We hear about Frank Reich, how much he enjoys and likes Jacoby Brissett. He's really apparently impressed with him as well, and knows that he got a lot of experience last year, so on and so forth. Not a whole lot, but like I said, there were some interesting guys not practicing. Muhort, I know that as far as I can remember, Quincy Wilson and Nate Hairston didn't practice. I don't believe either. So maybe this is process. Maybe this is something. Man, I would honestly hate to think that Muhort and or Wilson, either way, weren't ready to practice. I would hope that this is just something that they want to double check on those guys because they were injured last year. That is a part of what this OTA period is. And it is the first section of OTAs, and it is the second day at the time. So I'm hoping that that's really the issue. And I mean, if Muhort's not ready to play physically, he's just not going to be on this team. And I can't imagine that they would have re-signed him even to just a cheap 1-year deal had he not been ready. So I kind of think of it about it that way. Wilson, on the other hand, now I never heard this, but there was rumor, and I don't even believe it was with the beat writers and such down there at training camp, but people were assuming that one of the comments that I believe Pagano made last year about people not coming in and being prepared, not being physically ready to practice and play in camp was pointed at Wilson. I don't recall that. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I just don't recall that, nor do I believe it, because he was there and he looked good to me. He didn't look like he was out of shape or anything like that. So I don't know, but I would hate to think that he had some sort of a negative situation going in to OTAs. This is a big year for him. He looked good last year when he did get on the field, but he didn't get a lot of playing time, and they just didn't have the trust in him, or they didn't feel like he was healthy or something. This is not the year to be doing that. This is the year that he needs to come in and prove that he's a legit corner in the NFL. I mean, that's just something that absolutely has to happen. So thinking about all these guys, hopefully we get a little more clarity the next little session of OTAs. I would like to see that. So let's move on to Andrew Luck. I know that you guys have heard this all before, but I haven't had a chance to talk about it. I've had a couple days off, a lot going on. So maybe I've got something interesting to say, maybe I don't, but Luck with throwing, we understand this, and this is something that has just been beaten into our heads. It's been beaten into everyone nationally that Andrew Luck isn't throwing footballs, and they keep making this distinction that it's been for so many days. Everybody nationally, I think, forgets about October of last year. He was throwing the ball. He was throwing the ball earlier than that, and then re-aggravated whatever he had done with his surgery and such, and that was the cause of it. So it hasn't been nearly as long as they say. I mean, what we're looking at October, into May. So what, 6-7 months, tops, not almost 2 years like everybody's kind of making it out to be. Now, if you want to go into game, actual NFL game throwing, sure. But, I don't understand the relevance of that at all as far as to even say that, because, for that matter, every quarterback goes without so many months of throwing a football every offseason. What the hell's the point in talking about that? I don't get it. So on the other hand, I don't think that you guys have to be getting the sense that nobody's worried. And I don't feel like it's like last year. They assumed that he was coming back. Andrew Luck has publicly said, not only to the beat writers and everybody else in the press conferences, but and just out there, it's been out there, it's obvious that he said that he, felt like he was progressing fairly well last year, got ahead of himself, and may have tweaked something or whatever it was that gave him a setback. And I think that this isn't really the same line of thought, in my opinion, this year. These guys are very confident in Andrew Luck coming back. He's stacked. I mean, the dude's clearly got range of motion. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to be as thick and as big as he is. I mean, he's not just sitting around doing curls with dumbbells, guys. I mean, this guy's going through a complete rigorous program. He is, I mean, in the truest sense of the word. It may not be a football, but it doesn't matter. He's got the range of motion. He is throwing overhand. If you've watched Tom House's whatever you want to call it, his the way the situation that he has with these guys, what he does with them, and how he gets them through his whole damn, I can't even think of the right word, but the whole thing is about throwing overhand with the weighted. It looks like a lock and a sock almost, prison rules, but it's a weighted heavy bag, and he's throwing that overhand the entire time. That has to be something that if he wasn't able to do that, that would be a major red flag. And there is nothing that he's doing right now that is as light as a football. So I think that everybody has to get their worries out of the way, whether it's a small football, weighted football. Andrew's fingers aren't shrinking, guys. It doesn't matter how big the football is, or if it's even a small football. I don't even know that I feel like we heard that once last year, and everybody just assumes he's still throwing these tiny little footballs. That's just not the case. He's doing the program that Tom House has set up for him. He looks good. He feels good. He talks about it. And none of the coaches, GM Chris Ballard is not worried. None of that is an issue. So let's move on from that. I don't think that we're going to learn anything new from Andrew Luck until we actually start seeing him throw the football, nor do I feel that it's really a concern. I just don't. And they don't see it to be a concern. I don't see it to be a concern. I don't think that you guys do either. So I think that we can move on from that. So let's do the dirty here and look at what the Colts are getting, pushed around as far as being, at the bottom of the roster. The Colts are continually getting plugged by different, whatever platforms, ESPN, CBS Sports, all these guys. The Colts got the lowest grade in the division, apparently, according to CBS Sports, for their offseason. Look, who cares? I mean, I've written these too, and we've talked about it. So obviously, I feel like you guys care, because I mean it's annoying. This is kind of our platform to vent a little bit and talk about kind of how the Colts are treated nationally. Look, the Colts are in rebuild. We have to expect this to some degree, and I think that as the season inches closer, as we start either adding some pieces, possibly, whatever, Breland or maybe even Kendricks. Neither of those are a sure thing, so let's not assume that. But if we do add a couple guys between now and then, there are some guys out there. Jake Arthur did something on Stampede Blue the other day where he put out some of the most obvious guys that are still available out there. And there's some guys that could, I wouldn't say be game changers, but they could make an impact. I think that Breland could make a real impact. I think Hendricks could make a real impact as well. And he would be a guy who would definitely shake up that linebacking core. And I think that Breland comes in. A lot of people are saying, who do you start in front of him, Pierre, or who does he start in front of, Pierre or Wilson? And who cares, right? I mean, that's what they want, right? Out of the competition in camp. I mean, are we just wanting to hand it to somebody because Wilson's young and Pierre and for the record, Breland is, if I'm not mistaken, is younger than Desir. So why do we care who he starts in front of if he is to get signed? That doesn't make any sense to me. Who cares? They've got 3 good quality starting cornerbacks on the outside that can play boundary. And they've got Hairston, who I think is presumed to be the nickel this year, with a couple other guys who can play in that role. I don't understand the thought process of don't bring him in because we've got 2 starting corners. Have you guys been paying attention to Colts football the past several years? I mean, we have had a massive set of injuries every single year. So let's forget about all that and just assume that they could use another starting level corner. They could use another starting level linebacker. And then for the record, they could actually probably use another starting level defensive tackle. Whether they do or not, I don't know. We don't know what really Danico Autry is going to bring to the table. We don't know what Nunes Roches is going to bring to the table. These guys, look, competition needs to be the primary focus. And it's not to keep reiterating the crap that comes out of Ballard's mouth, almost coach speak at this point, but it really does. They need to have this all set up and going forward, ready for some massive competition for training camp. Because if they don't, they're either going to hit a rash of injuries or they're not going to live up to what they should be getting into. They have to have this, or the Colts are going to look like crap again this year. And that's not something that you or I or anybody in the organization wants to see. So let's just assume that anybody that they can bring in who can be starter level is worth bringing in. I mean, they've got a ton of money. The Colts have plenty of room on this roster. Nobody is sitting in this in the headquarters there thinking that their job is completely safe. Very few of them. Very, very few of them. So whatever Chris Ballard and company can do to bring in some new starters, I'm all for it. I think you guys should be too. Who cares who starts what? Competition does matter, especially now in the middle of a rebuild. It's another thing when you're talking about you've already got 3 or 4 starting level defensive tackles. Why use another one, or why do you need another one or something of that sort? So let's push that aside and just hope that they can bring in all the talent that they possibly can to get this rebuild expedited a little bit. I think that's important. I think that's something that we really need to hope for. So let's move on a little bit. We'll do this right after the break. We're going to get into the Anthem changes by the NFL with Roger Goodell and all that crap. And look, here's the situation. If you guys don't want to listen to it, that's fine. I understand it. But if you're going to listen to it, we're going to have a big boy conversation about it here right after this. So if you can't handle that, don't listen. Otherwise, let's come back. We're going to talk about it. I mean, guys, this isn't anything that we is off limits. This is NFL crap. It's going to be something that's going to be talked about. Let's get it out of the way. We'll do it right after the break. Welcome back, guys. I have to get my little drink in there and that little bit of a break. So let's talk about it. So well, I'm gonna be kind of a smart ass for a second here and use some air quotes, but apparently the vote among owners was unanimous that the national anthem situation with the players kneeling is going to be, to where the players, if they don't want to come out during the national anthem, can stay in the locker room or designated area. But basically, if you're on the field, you're expected to stand and whatever. And if you don't, you're going to get some sort of a penalty and, possibly a fine. So let's kind of reverse engineer this entire thing first and foremost. It was not a vote from what we've heard. I mean, we did see this coming out, and it sounded like it too, because we saw a couple owners coming out and say that they abstained from voting. Judd York did that. There was at least another one, and I think maybe two, but another high-level executive, I think it was for the Jets, said that he's not, or that he either paid their fine or he wasn't going to fine them. I don't remember which it was. It's not that important. The point is that there are people that were supposedly involved in this vote that did not partake in this vote. This was not a vote. This was where they come out and they say, what do you guys think? Asking a handful of them, and the handful of them said, this is great. I mean, it was almost like a really bad competition committee meeting, to where just a few guys showed up, they took what they said and moved on. So it was not a vote. We do not know who did or who did not actually have some input on all of this. But it does not appear that it was a vote. That's not really the problem. I mean, it probably is for the players, and it probably is to some of the owners who were either not involved in this at all, or some guys who were just kicked aside and were not listened to, or did not actually get a voice, or whatever the case may be. But this to me seems like this is a bad situation for everybody. Just on if you look at the professional side of it, okay, the CBA is something that they do every year. Why is this something? It's not a competition committee situation, but it was treated like one. So how does that navigated? I don't know this. I'm completely just talking here, trying to figure this whole thing out, just as you guys are, or maybe you're not. Maybe you're sick of it. I'm sick of it. I can't stand talking about it, but it's, like I said, it's something that's NFL related. It's not political. It's about the game. And we've got to have this conversation because it's necessary. So what do they do with the CBA here? Is this something that is going to continue to be fought by the NFLPA up until the season, and probably up through the season? Are they even going to be able to, how I don't understand how they can do some issues on the field as far as a penalty, when this hasn't been properly constructed. My brain doesn't, I don't get that. It doesn't make sense to me at all. So I'm not sure about that, but let's, to the core of the matter, we see what's going on. And I think that, I don't typically read a lot of guys in the Indy area, but when it's not, it's not a schematic thing, or it's not something that I may be interested in talking or reading about in the future, I'll read what it was. And I don't read Greg Doyle very often, but I read his article today, and he did talk about it. And I think he made a lot of great points. And as I said, this isn't a political conversation. So if you're putting it in that realm, go away. That's not what we're doing here. We're talking about guys who are in the league, who should have, you would think, rights to be able to approach all these situations the way that they feel necessary. Okay. There's real issues with what's going on. I think this is ridiculous, because my biggest issue with the new Anthem situation, just in general, is this: there are going to be people who are covering the Colts or the game or the NFL, and I don't say guys, but journalists who can't legitimately write about football, who who don't have anything wise to say about the game, or what situation they're in, or anything constructive about the game itself of football. They're going to be the ones back there hiding in the corners, waiting to find out who's in the back, who's in the locker room. And then they're going to blow this crap up, and it's going to be stupid. It is going to be so ridiculous. And if nothing else, it's going to fuel the fire that nobody cares about. That I don't care who kneels. I couldn't care less. I don't know why anybody does, to be quite honest with you. I don't get it. If you're one of those people that think that it's disrespectful to the flag, that's great. Who cares? I don't. I mean, if you're someone who doesn't think that it's disrespectful to the flag, well, I don't care about that either. I don't care if you put ketchup and mustard on your hot dog. I don't care if you swim. I don't care if you do this or that. Oh, why are people so damn worried about what other people are doing? I need to understand this, because it just doesn't matter to me. I don't know why it matters to anybody else. If you want to watch football, you can spare 60 seconds of your precious lives and forget about it. Because look, let me put it this way. If you're at the game, you don't even notice it. You don't even see it. You don't even see it. If you're at home, you're listening to idiots who don't know anything about football talk about who's kneeling or who's in the locker room. Who cares? Who cares? The simple fact that anybody political has anything to say about this is absolutely ridiculous. And to think that you would get some sort of a conversation about people don't belong in the country who do this, and it's not just the political sphere. This is NFL fans, people that I'm talking about. So this is why I'm saying it's not political. These are football fans who are saying this stuff. You don't belong in the country because you don't. Guys, who cares? Who cares? Life is stressful enough. Get over it. Forget about this crap. Okay? If they kneel, they've got a reason that they feel they should kneel. You don't want them to kneel? Tough. Get over it. Or don't watch, or just don't. I mean, it doesn't even make a difference. I think that might be my biggest issue with all this. I just don't care. And I don't know why so many other people want to fill their lives with what other people are doing during a song that's played before a football game or your kid's peewee baseball game or anything else, and why they're even playing it to begin with. College games don't have it. It doesn't even come out before the game until the NFL owners started jerking money away from the military and were taking millions upon millions of dollars to do all these things. Nobody cared about it then because the players were in the locker room to begin with during the anthem. This is stuff that nobody cares about. People are outraged about nothing. Who cares? Who cares? Do yourselves a favor. That's all we're going to talk. We're done with it. I'm not talking about it anymore. I do yourselves a favor. Get over it, or stop talking about football, because this is going to be something that's going to continue to come up. I'm not talking about it anymore. I'm done with it. I can't even stand to be on Twitter anymore because so many idiots are on there talking about this or that and then the other thing. And it's so annoying. I just can't stand it. I don't care. You shouldn't either. If you do, that's fine. That's your prerogative. But do yourself a favor, release some stress, forget about it, focus on the football game. It's 45 seconds to 60 seconds of your day that is going to be dealing with that. And if that's the case, I mean, don't watch or don't talk about these idiots. Like I said, the people who are talking about who's sitting and who's kneeling and who's in the locker room, they can't write about football anyways. You shouldn't be listening to them to begin with. Okay. So that's kind of the point with all this. I just think that it's a real sad situation that is where we're at now, not just with NFL football. I think it's a sad situation that that's where we're at personally, that everybody is so strung out about what other people do for 60 seconds during a song that they can't even see straight. They can't wrap their heads around it. Who cares? You're going to find just as many military guys on one side of the argument as you will on the other. You'll find just as many whites and blacks and everybody else on one side of the argument than you will on the other. Everybody's going to have their token white guy over here saying this. There'll be a black conservative over here saying something about this. Guys, people are going to have different opinions on this, different views. Forget. If you have your opinion, everybody's got one on this now. I just choose not to care about any of it. So, like I said, no more talking about it. I'm done with it. I hope that you guys are too, for the most part. We're going to get back into just about everything. Now, I'm going to run through really quick the roster and kind of see what I see as some possible situations about each position. Okay. Like I said, I mentioned about Muhort. We're talking about Matt Slauson, who was sitting in at right guard with their very first day of media access. So we saw that. I don't know what I think about that because I don't think Slauson's very good. I think he's a good depth guy. I think that he's a guy who can be a solid depth player, a guy who can be there to sit over the center and sit over the guard positions and be a bit of a utility guy on the interior. But if we're assuming that Jack Mewhort is healthy, or that Braden Smith was brought in considered to be a starting level guard, those two I would take every single day over Slauson. I mean, from what I saw of him last year, I can't imagine that all of a sudden he just got amazingly good over last year. He's had some rough times. So I don't see how Matt Slauson is starting. The only assumption that I can make is that they just didn't have Smith in there first. Maybe he's not ready. I'm fine with that, even though they consider him to be a starting level guard. But I truly believe that Jack Mewhort should be starting right now. He should be the guy, if he's healthy, he's the guy that you put in there at right guard, assuming that he's going to win the starting spot and that everybody can just compete for it, and that's fine. Now, here's the thing, too. I don't care who wins. I don't care who takes that. Right now, on the outside looking in, I would have Mewhort and then whoever Slauson or Smith is better at the time. Now, if Slauson's actually better than Mewhort when it comes to minicamp and training camp and preseason and so on, so be it. Whoever's the best in those times and when it comes down to brass tacks, start them. That's who plays. The cornerback position's a little funny to me because, like I said, there's a lot of guys in here that none of us know much about. We've got Chris Milton who's in here, Kenny Moore. Those guys, DJ White especially, is another guy who is considered to be some solid depth. But we've got Wilson, we've got Nate Hairston, and we've got Pierre Desir as three starters. The dip is solid, like deep after that. There's not a lot of depth in there. And I don't trust Chris Milton. I don't think Kenny Moore is great. A lot of people love him. I mean, he had a solid season last year when he played. He did pretty good, came on better at the end of the season. I get that. But that's just one guy. There's three positions there that need some real depth. And I don't think they've got it right now. I think DJ White's a guy who could be. I just don't know if he's there yet. Along the defensive line, I think they've got a lot of youth mixed in with some guys with experience. I think it's interesting that we haven't heard anything about Danico Autry at all over the past few days. I don't expect to hear a lot. I want to hear that this guy is looking good, and we haven't heard much of anything from him. They've been prompted with something about Danico Autry, and they have not said anything about him that I remember. So that's something that to me is a little strange. But along the defensive line, defensive tackle wise, guys, it's Woods, Hassan Ridgeway, and Grover Stewart. None of those guys, aside from Al Woods, has been starter level. And Al Woods is actually, a guy right now who's, one of the heavier two guys between he and Stewart who, they've got to be battling for this position, and they've got to prove that they're worthy of being in this scheme. I think especially Woods. I mean, he took the nose tackle position last year, apparently from Hankins. So what do we do with that? What happens there? I don't know. I think that's something that's definitely going to be touched on as the season goes. I think that we may see a real committee, so to speak, rotation up there up front, because I just don't know. To me, Hassan Ridgeway is not a guy who's he hasn't been taking leaps each year. He's been crawling. Grover Stewart, lots of experience last year, did a pretty good job. He has the explosion they want. I'm still a little worried about his growth. Is there any? I don't know, because we haven't heard anything about it. Deshaun Bond is another guy who, I believe he sat out. Most of the other interior offensive linemen, we haven't heard anything about. The linebacker position, this is going to be so fluid lately. I think that they desperately need Kendricks. I think that he's a guy who has to come. I mean, they have to. I think that they legitimately have to sign this guy. He's 28. I mean, that he's still very good. He's still very, very good. Now, a lot of people have talked about they see him, that the Eagles saw him as a two-down guy. I don't think that they saw him as a two-down guy. I think they saw his position as a two-down guy. And from what I understand, from what I've listened to and what their defensive coordinator was saying about the will position there, is that the will position, they were kind of treating it, and this is my own words here, but they were kind of treating it like the Sam. like that guy, like Morrison, like I was talking about earlier, who doesn't get a ton of snaps, 30, 40 snaps, or 30, 30 at most kind of snaps a game. And I think that that's what they were doing with him. They only saw him in that role as a 2-down player, as the will. So that is something that I think that he is going to be coming back hungry to prove. He played last year a lot. He did really well, had a great season. He can rush the passer a little bit. He's effective. He doesn't get a lot of sacks, but he is an effective guy at creating some, pressure points for the quarterback, pushing them out of the pocket. Good in pursuit, especially after the quarterback. But they've got some, they need some improvement there. We don't know what Sky Moore really is. We know what people think he is, but that's it. I mean, we don't know a ton about him. Zaire Franklin, we don't know a bunch about him. Matthew Adams, we have to see more of these guys. None of these guys are a sure thing. None of these guys, we could really even have much of an opinion on at all, to be quite honest with you. But the running back position is also somewhat exciting. We know what we expect to see out of Marlon Mack. We expect him to see him get a little better in a couple of the positions, a couple of the spots, and a couple of the jobs that he has to do back in the backfield. But everybody's excited about Nyheim Hines, myself included. Excuse me. Nyheim Hines is going to be a guy that Frank Reich is going to love in this offense. I think Andrew Luck is going to love him in this offense. He's a guy who's going to be able to be multifaceted. They're going to be able to run with him, pass to him, line him up outside. They've got some really cool concepts. I've been studying Philly's offense from last year. Now, how much of that Reich brings over into the Colts this year, I don't know, but I have been studying it because I want to be able to get a better grasp on some of the passing concepts that they use, how often they kick their running back out into the slot or just whatever. So I'm interested to find that out and kind of see what they've got there going on. But Nyheim Hines is going to be a weapon, guys. He definitely is. He's definitely going to be in that rotation. And I think he's going to get I think he's going to have a little more than what Marlon Mack had last year. I think Mack was right around the 90 to 95 carries or something right around there. I think that Hines might break 100 this year. I'm pretty excited about that. Now, the safety core, we like Geathers. We know what Green has been so far. Malik Hooker is definitely a guy that we want to see come back and be fully healthy. A lot of people are still kind of raving about Michael Sereno, the UDFA out of Adams State. He doesn't have a ton of height. They've had him listed at 6'1", not the Colts, but other sites, especially his college. The Colts have him at 5'11", and I don't think he's any taller than that because he just does not have a lot of. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of height to me. When you see him on the field next to some other guys that are maybe 6'1" or 6'2", he looks pretty small. But they love him, and apparently, like I said, he killed that workout. So the Colts at safety really have some holes to fill. I think that you have Geathers, and theoretically Hooker back there, but they could really probably use Trey Boston or one of those guys, and they can cut Green loose, or they can cut Ronald Martin loose, or one of those guys. That's actually probably what they would do, or even one of the UDFA guys that are in there, cut them loose and just let the competition play out. This isn't like I said, this isn't a situation where everybody should be happy about Geathers and Hooker and anybody else, and even Matthias Farley. Although Matthias Farley, in my opinion, is very underrated. I think he had an excellent season last year, and I think that, he's only been in the league for 3 years. He's a guy who still has some growing, I think, to show for. But at just the same, I still think you bring in a guy like Boston. I think Boston would actually fit better than Vaccaro as far as who they brought in for interviews or for meetings and whatnot. I think they've got some. I think they have to get rid of somebody on that, and they've got to bring in a solid veteran. I just don't think you can. If Hooker, you have to be better than what you did last year at quarterback. You can't put in the Tolzien of the safety group being TJ Green and assume that it's going to be okay next to Clayton Geathers. You've got to have a backup plan. You've got to be solid 3 deep there. And if you think that Geathers and Farley, can be that, then so be it. But TJ Green's still not a backup, in my opinion, back there. He's got so much work to do. He's got speed and athleticism. And we keep hearing these people say this all the time. Oh man, he's got it all. They just have to give him a chance. He's had a lot of chances. He's had too many chances, in my opinion. And he's been on a bad roster, and he still hasn't been able to produce. So I'm get him out. I just think they've got to move on from him. Obviously, he's not going to be the first to go when they bring somebody else in, but they'll have to, once Hooker gets healthy, in my opinion, just cut bait. He doesn't do anything for the team. I just don't see how he does anything. They've got a guy like Hairston who could actually fill in that speed rush role but that rushing role out of the secondary. He had a couple sacks last year. They blitzed him off of the slot, and I think that he's a guy who could do that. And you can also put another guy in that nickel role behind him. So I think that they'll be able to be pretty interesting with that. Maybe add a guy like Sky Moore into that situation to be back there for coverage, and use a guy like Hairston to blitz, as opposed to worrying about TJ Green if he can stay on the field or do anything. It's what it is, and this is what he's created. I'm excited about the tight end group. I think it's going to be a fun group, and I think it's actually going to be competitive when it comes down to it. I think that Ebron adds a lot. He's going to be a lot of fun in this offense as well. He's going to be split out a little bit. Something that I looked at tonight was that the Colts the Eagles last year, even though they used a lot of tight end sets, like 2, 3, even, a lot of 0 sets, I just think that he's going to be one that moves around a lot. I think he's basically another receiver on this team. You look at his height, whereas he's 6'4", 250 to 260, somewhere in there. He's a guy with a lot of speed, and I think that he and Eric Swoop are built a lot alike. Swoop's going to be a guy who should come back and could also be another big-time weapon. This could be a really fun group when you look at it. A lot of people nationally don't even know who Swope is. They've forgotten that Eric Ebron's on the team. You get a couple receivers who kind of earn their role and earn their place on this team, and you've got some tight ends. It could be a lot of fun. And I love Ross Travis. I can't deal with people with first names. But I think he's a really interesting guy who's going to get a lot of looks as well. So I don't know if I touched on every position, but I touched on the ones that interested me. So we talked about a lot tonight, guys. It's going to be a good season, off season. It's going to be a little boring probably at times as well. We'll try to put at least 2 podcasts up every single week, and we'll do this as we go forward. We'll try to get some interesting things to talk about. We'll break down positions as they continue to churn out. Looking for OTA news, looking for all kinds of stuff, and we'll do it that way. Also, we'll try to do some fun things with you guys as well. Try to get you guys a little more involved in the show as well. Maybe whether it be some more call-in shows and such, or just whatever. But you guys have been great. I appreciate you guys, quite a bit. I think you guys have been awesome, and love the fact that you guys are tuning in and listening on the podcast itself. You guys have been great. Thank you guys for all the reviews. Please churn those out. We can crack 200 reviews on the podcast on Apple Podcasts. That would be a massive, massive victory for us. A lot of things going in the right direction. We're almost we're just over 550 subscribers here on the YouTube channel. Get your people to do that. We get up to 1,000. We get a lot more excitement going on. So a lot of things going in the right direction, hopefully to have those goals met by the 2018 season. So we got a lot of things going on. You guys are a great big part of it, and I appreciate you all very much. Make sure you guys get yourselves to Stampede Blue. Go to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review. We'll talk to you guys later right here on the Colts Cast.